Before Apollo 7, which was, of course, the first manned flight in the Apollo program, there was a lot of concern about how much difficulty we would have moving around inside the spacecraft under weightless conditions. Intravehicular activity, this was called, or IVA for short. We hadn't had experience with this before because Mercury and Gemini spacecraft were simply too small. It quickly became apparent that we would have no difficulty whatever. It was quite possible to move around at will. Almost automatically, we even began taking advantage of the phenomenon of weightlessness. Here, for example, I'm putting on a communications lead, and I just stow it momentarily in midair, so to speak. This was a useful technique for handling anything but very small objects. Those tended to drift off and get lost. In working inside the spacecraft, we found that there was no need for elaborate arrangements for restraining ourselves in particular positions. Although we had foot restraints at the navigation station, for instance, I was able to maintain a very stable position using only 2 small handholds. We also found that in operations such as changing out a lithium hydroxide canister, we could apply just about as much force as we could on the ground, as long as we could get a toe hold or a handhold. Many people had anticipated that we would need extensive aids for this sort of operation, but apparently this will not be needed to any great degree on future flights. There are many things which are even easier to do under weightless conditions. The large and bulky pressure suit, which Walt Cunningham is pulling on here, is much easier to don and doff. On the ground, it's a real chore to get into the pressure suit without some help. It is also easier to get into and out of small and constricting spaces. Here I am getting ready to enter the sleep station under the right couch. There's just barely room for your body with a couple inches to spare. On the ground it's a bit of a struggle to worm your way in there, yet in the weightless state it's very easy to get in and out of the sleep station. Another aspect is that it really doesn't matter what is up and what is down. Although I'm inverted here, for instance, there's no sense of disorientation or confusion. Walt Cunningham, who is something of a gymnast, could even tumble inside the spacecraft without disorientation, and it was somewhat safer than working out on a trampoline or a high bar on the ground. Even if we bumped into something on occasion, we didn't hit it hard enough to either damage the spacecraft or hurt ourselves. Wally Schirra didn't even have to bother with the restraint belt when he was using the exercise device, a means of maintaining muscle tone. The freedom to move around was also important physiologically. Post-flight medical measurements indicated that our calcium loss was less than might have been anticipated, and this was attributed, at least in part, to our intravehicular activity.